Welcome back, everyone. Today we are going to talk about text field in SwiftUI. Few things I'm going to cover about text field today are introduction to the text field, where you would use it, how many ways you can bind a data to your text field, how you can bring a focus to your text field when you load the screen, or if you want to do it manually. Today we are only going to talk about how you can bring a focus and your keyboard up when you load the screen, and how you can add a clear button to your text field. These are the common scenarios that you are going to face in real life application when you're going to develop them. So let's get started and write some code. So let's add a text field first and see what are the requirements of the text field. So text field, there are different initializers for the text field. It takes a title, which will be the prompt. It will shown as a prompt, and then value, format, and a different prompt that you can show. The text field is rendered differently in iOS and Mac OS. The title by default in iOS shown as a prompt, but if you use the text field in the Mac OS, the title will be shown as a label, and then your prompt will be shown within the text field. We'll have a look at that once we get into the Mac development. We don't want to use any format or formatter. We only want to use a title and a text field. So title, we can say first name, and then it needs a binding. So if you have seen my previous videos, you would know what we need to do here. So let's create a state variable, first name, string, and let's initialize it to an empty string and say dollar first name. That's how you create a state and bind it to your text field. You can see the text field is now ready. It's not styled properly, so let's add some styles. So what are the different styles you can apply to your text field? So text field style, let's see. So it has a plain style, which is the default with no decoration, the rounding border one. So that's the one we are going to use. And that's the one that you usually see in all your iOS application whenever in the default application that Apple has. So this is the text field with the rounded borders. You don't have to do anything, just style it and it just works. Let's change it to use the iPhone 14 Pro that we have been using, and let's try and run the app in the simulator. I'm going to close this guy here. All right, so we have the simulator, we have the keyboard, and we can start typing. Bring this keyboard in. So you can see the also suggestions are in there. Let's create another text field, the title, email, and we have to create another state property. So you can use command D to copy and the same line with where you are. So that would be email ID, and let's use dollar email ID here. So our email ID state is binded, and let's run it. And you can see my email ID is already there. So let's create a style, text field style rounded border, and this time I want to say keyboard type is going to be email address. So let's run it now. This is the keyboard for the first name, and when I switch to email, my keyboard now has the @ sign at front, so the user will be able to just use the @ sign and it doesn't have to go to the number. So if I have to use this guy, then I have to click here and then use the @ sign, go back. But if I use email address as a keyboard type, then I can just say g.g. It's so much easier for your users to not switch between the keyboards of numeric and your alpha keyboard, so that they can easily enter a email address. So whenever you are designing your text field, think about how the user is going to use it, and then try and find the modifiers which you can apply. Maybe you want to auto correct or disable the autocorrect, or so much stuff that you can do with the text field. I would encourage you to go through the text field modifiers and try them out and see how the keyboard change with your modifiers. It's really important because sometimes you want to just change the submit button to something else. So I would encourage you to go and find those modifiers and try them out. If you can't find them, any specific use case that you're trying to, let me know in the comments. Let's move on to the next part, which is how you bind your data to your text field. The first way that you have already seen is using the add state local variable within your view. But if you have a complex app, you might be using different models and stuff. You don't want to just use add state for all your object. So the next part is using an observable object. So we are going to create a class which will be person, and it is going to be an observable object. And this will, we are going to create, let's say person view model. And then you will have a struct, which is a person, and it has property first name string, where email ID as a string. And then in my view model, I'm going to have a published property, which will be for person of type person. And it will be initialized, then empty first name and an empty email ID. So that's the default value. Let's come here to content view. If you have seen the previous video, the add state is used for value types, but now we have a class which is a person view model. We need to use the state object, where we are going to call it person view model, and we are going to say person view model type and just initialize it. So that's way we have the person view model. Now we have to update our bindings. We have to say dollar person view model dot first name dot person dot first name, and here we have to say dollar person view model dot person dot email ID. This is how you can now move your data into a data object, which is a model of person. It has different properties. Then you create a wrapper around it, which is a view model, which is going to provide that data to the view. This is the MVVM architecture. You can use any architecture, but the idea here is to show how you can bind your data. You can just create another state object and then use the person model within it, or you can just bind directly the person model to your view. You can try different things and see what works in your application and your design system and use that model. I'm gonna use MVVM for most of my videos. So this is the way you can bind using the add published property from your model, from your view model. So let's try and run this, and it should work the same way. So we have the keyboard and email. So Karamjeet, so this karam@mail.com. So all good. Now my person also has age, and it is a double value. Let's add age here and initialize it to 0.0. And I want to add text field with the title age, and binding I want to say person view model dot person dot age. So now I got another age field, but I got an error here saying cannot convert value of binding double to expected argument type binding string. By default, text field wants a string type, but our age is of double type. So let's see how we can fix it. So let's go back and see what are the different initializers we have. So we have this initializer here, which says, okay, give me a title, give me a value, but also tell me what's the format. And the type of the format is parsable format style, like what can be passed from a string into the type. All right. So let's use that one, age, and we have a binding for person and age, and format I'm going to say it's going to be a number. This way text field knows that the binding that is provided is of type number and it's need to convert between the number and the string. Let's style the text field again with a rounded border. Let's run it again. So we have age as in there, but my keyboard is again my alphanumeric and I have to switch between and then update it. Let's update the keyboard type again, and this time I'm going to say it's a decimal pad because age is not going to be alphanumeric, it's just numeric. And this time when I choose my keyboard is I'm gonna say 33, delete the 0, say 33, first name, last name. All right, so this is how you can bind a different kind of format value to your text field. You can provide your own formatter as well. I'm not going to talk about that, and I would encourage you to create a formatter and look how you can create a formatter in Swift, and then try and bind that formatter to your text field and see how you can manipulate that format for your text field. I would encourage you to maybe add a date time field and see how you can add a date time formatter and how you can manipulate that format within your text field and bind into property in your person object. Now let's talk about focus. Whenever my UI load, I want to bring the focus to the first name so that user can just start typing. So let's see how we can add a focus to the text field. So let's create a focus state where first name focused, and it is going to be of type bool because it can be either focused or not. And let's bring it to my focused and bind a condition here which will say first name focused, and this is going to be a binding because we are going to update the first name focused later. So how I'm going to set the binding, the way I have tried in my apps setting it is when you get on appear. So when your view is going to be appear, we are going to dispatch an action, dispatch queue dot main dot async, and I'm going to use an async after here. We need now plus seconds 2, and then we are going to execute some code here, and then we are going to say first name dot focused is equal to true, and after 2 seconds it is going to bring the focus here. Let's run the app and see what happens. So after 2 seconds it brought the focus. So what you can do is you need to manipulate this timer based on your requirement, like if you're adding a navigation or something like that. So navigation takes time, and then your focus. This is the way I have found to bring a focus to the field that I want to set. Let's try and change it to 0.5 seconds. So let's see if it works. So it's pretty fast and quick than adding a 2 second. So you have to play with that number. This is the way I have found, but if you know a way better than this, do let me know in the comments, and that would be helpful for me as well. So that's how you can bring a focus to your text field. Now let's try and add a clear button to the field. This is a very common requirement that you get to do in your apps, like you have a field and you want to add a clear button. So how you add a clear button? So I have a text field and I want to show a clear button on top of it. There is a better way to do it, which is called overlay. And with the overlay, I can overlay a content on top of the view. So let's add an edge stack here because we want to move that So add a spacer, and then I want to add a button here, which is going to have some action and a label, which will be an image, system name. Let's find image with the cross with the circle. This is the one we want. So let's copy this name and put it here. We run it now. Now our text has a nice cross button, but this is not styled properly. So let's say if we can change some, let's add a padding, which is just trailing maybe 10 pixels, and change the foreground color to maybe gray. Let's see how it looks now. This is much better than before. All right, so when we tap on the button, what we want to do, we want to do person view model dot person dot first name is equal to empty string. Let's run it now. So our first name is there. Let's type something. Then if I tap on it, voila, it's cleared now. It's so easy to do stuff in SwiftUI, but you need to know how you need to do it. So I believe this is the best way to implement a clear action in your button, which you can add to your text field. This is all I wanted to cover in this video about the text field. Introduction to the text field, how you style. You can add custom styles. If you have seen the previous video, you would know how you can create a custom style. So I would encourage you to try and do that. And then we went through how you add a numeric value and bind that to your text field, and then ways to bind data to your text, and then finally how you can add a focus state and your clear button to your text field. I hope this helps, and you have learned something new in this video. Keep coding, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.